much with just me waffling on at the beginning. So, as I said, welcome to another one in the National Policing Cybersecurity webinar series. It's a fantastic one today. I think it's all about working from home, the lessons that we've learned so far, and how it's maybe affected, or what we've learned about managing our mental health and our physical health, and our environments whilst at home. Our aim today is, I would love to answer all of the questions that you're hopefully going to put to our panel, because this is an interactive session. It isn't just us talking. So for those of you who haven't used Zoom before, if you have a look at the bottom of your screen, you actually have some options to get involved and speak with the panelists yourselves. So you'll notice that you have the Q&A box. If you click on that, you can actually type in a question. You can ask any one of our panelists a question. We have Charlie from the Cyber Griffin team who's monitoring those questions, and we'll be referring to him as we go. If there's a question on there that you like and you want it to be asked, you can actually click on the little thumb button, and the more votes a question gets, the higher up it will go, and obviously the more chance there is of that question then being asked. And you can also answer questions as well. If you feel like you're in a good enough position to answer it, please feel free to answer that question as well. So you'll also have the chat box, and if you open up the chat box, you'll see it come up on the side of your screen there. You should have an introduction into everyone that is here at the moment and to the session. Again, feel free to type anything that you want to during the session. You'll notice down the bottom, just above the text box, that you can select either all panelists or all panelists and attendees. So again, get involved as much as you can. Please feel free to use that. However, please remember that this is a policing session, and as you'll see by the top of your screen, it is being recorded. So just remember the general rule of the internet, and that is that if you don't want something on there recorded forever, don't put it on there in the first place. Okay, so enough about that. I want to get the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the session. So Tarquin, I think I'll come to you first.
Yeah, my name's Tarquin Folliss. I'm Vice Chairman of RelianceACSN, which is a cybersecurity managed service provider. I've been working in security, on security policy for government for 30 odd years. I retired in 2013 and moved into the tech sector to work on cybersecurity, which is an area that fascinated me. And I think which is particularly relevant for all of us as we rely so heavily on technology, particularly working from home. So I'm really keen to pass on any bits of knowledge that I might have, and also to learn and listen from the rest of the panel.
Great. And Bob?
Hi everyone, Bob Bannister. I am founder of an organisation called iManage Performance Ltd, and we are a soft skills organisation working with private and public sector organisations in all sorts of areas of behavioural skills, so developing management, leadership, organisation behavioural activity. But over the last 20 years, have interestingly specialised in the idea of managing remote teams or being a remote team worker. And of course, that's played into our hands rather for the last few weeks, where we've been rather busy running remote sessions, helping people to work through how they operate more effectively as a remote worker.
Great, fantastic. And Ian?
Hello everyone, I'm Ian McCue. I'm the owner of Ultimate Mental Conditioning. I'm a hypnotist, NLP practitioner, amongst other techniques which I've learned along the way. Been doing that for 12 years, as well as having a policing background and understanding. And UMC 50 is basically a company which evolves around understanding people's behaviours, anxieties and frustrations, and how best to get people to learn how to deal with those different issues and get them to build up a nice, confident mindset.
And lastly, but certainly not least, Krystal.
Hi, I'm Krystal. I run my own health and fitness business called Krystal Fitness. I've been doing that for 5 years. I also have a policing background, but I ultimately work with people, mainly one-to-one with personal training, but I've also got an online element to my business where I coach people with their nutrition as well.
Well, a real mixed bag of expertise on the panel, so it should be really interesting to see all your different perspectives around this. as we said at the beginning, it is a cybersecurity webinar series. So although we are looking at working from home, managing your mental and physical health, there are particular reasons as to why that would be beneficial, particularly when trying to prevent yourself from being a victim of cybercrime. So Tarquin, I wonder if you're able to sort of take us through what the current picture is around cybercrime.
Sure, thanks, Richard. And also, I should add, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk on this webinar. I guess I've worked at home. Since leaving government, I spent most of my time working at home, but never for a sustained or concerted period as this. There's always been a variety. And being isolated from your team in particular, not having that ability to communicate face-to-face, I think puts a more psychological strain, which I know other people will talk about, which lays you open to, how can I say it, more vulnerabilities out there. And of course, criminals in particular benefit. They like to look at crises and they like to benefit from them. They see a real advantage in them. And this hasn't changed with this particular crisis we're going through. The number of attacks online has increased considerably. Online crime is now grown in the last, well, actually since the lockdown, about 30-odd% by some reckoning, which is a massive increase. And of course, it is targeted on individuals. And for companies in particular and organizations, you're used to going through into an office, through a barrier, through a gates and guard system, but that no longer exists. You at home are the perimeter of the company or organization you're working for. And those who wish to do harm or to exploit those organizations look at you as an individual as a potential route in to those organizations as well, not just as a potential victim for them in crime. So some of the things we've seen, I mean, these people are fairly cynical. They're not going to be worried about some of the niceties that we might. So inevitably, a lot of the scams, frauds we're seeing are related around COVID-19 itself. And they can come in the form of emails or text messages, usually purporting to be the government or an organization, asking for or suggesting that they can provide you with financial help if you can lock on to a particular website, which of course then gives away your personal details, or indeed suggesting that you are being fined because you've failed to isolate correctly. And again, all of those are fake or phishing emails designed to either get your payment details, your personal details, your personally identifiable details. And the criminals are very adept at using social engineering, at playing on our concerns, our anxieties, in order to give them an advantage and to make us do things that, in retrospect, we really shouldn't have done, to rush us into making judgment calls which are too quick and which lay us open to theft, to abuse. So I'm hoping that we'll talk a bit more about that in this session, and that I can give you some pointers on what to look at. But I would say the most important thing is to give yourself time. All of us have got plenty of time at the moment where we are, and giving ourselves time to look at the messages and texts that we get from outside, especially those that are unsolicited, will help us to defend ourselves much better.
Great, thank you. So for anyone watching, if you open up the chat box, we're going to put a couple of links into where you can get more information around certain types of cybercrime and how to protect yourselves from cybercrime. So feel free to copy and paste that out and have a look at that after this session today. Thanks a lot, Tarquin. So actually, I just want to stay with you again before we move around the panel. I just wonder, how have you managed the transition to not working from home hardly ever to having to work from home the entire time? What challenges have you faced?
I think one of the biggest challenges is setting a routine. You know, you're in your home environment. I'm extremely lucky. I've got a purpose-built office, which I designed, got ready because I knew I was going to work when I was a consultant from home quite a lot. But for a lot of people, there isn't that luxury. You're probably having to share your workspace with other members of your family, or in a kitchen table or whatever. So it's very difficult to isolate yourself from your normal world and get into that kind of work mode, work think mentality. I think that's extremely challenging. Plus, you don't have the usual kind of things that happen in your daily routine, the commute or whatever, which gives a natural break between home and work. And that can lead to all sorts of problems. And I think actually the biggest problem is working too long, not setting yourself a timetable where you can say, right, that's the end of my working day, and now I'm going to relax, because we all need to do that, especially in this environment and under the stresses we're on at the moment. So those are the kind of, initial challenges I think that we face.
And Krystal, your whole business is completely different to that of Tarquin's. How have you managed this transition? Have you faced those same challenges or some unique ones?
It's been tough because most of my work involves me being face-to-face working with clients in the gym environment. When the gym closed, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to continue that element of the business, but actually using just FaceTime for one-to-one sessions with whatever equipment clients had available. The first week was just a bit of a trial and error to see what I could do, what could work. But it still doesn't feel right, although it's been, several weeks now. Everything's in my living room. I've got gym equipment that I use to train with. I've got my laptop here. I've got a tripod where I film things, and everything's just in one room. So just getting used to that. I'm still not used to it yet, but it works. It's not ideal. And as long as I can still help clients, help them get through this weird period, because everyone's in the same boat. But my focus has to be on how I can still help them at a distance, whether it's giving them advice, giving them programs they can do at home, doing FaceTime sessions, so we've still got that face-to-face element, if you like. It's been quite a transition because I'm not used to being home all the time. I come and go usually, two or three times throughout the day, and having an excitable puppy who wants attention when I'm trying to work with clients has been a bit of a struggle as well. So it's just been, like I say, 6-7 weeks now, and I'm still not quite used to it, but it's working. So it's just, I am grateful that I can still work with clients and help them. Obviously not an ideal situation, and it takes quite a bit of getting used to. And there's been some ups and downs. Some weeks have been better than other weeks, just through struggling with mental health as well. That's something that I have struggled with in the past. And I think by the third week of lockdown, I went into a bit of a dark hole and had to kind of climb out of that just because of the change. And yeah, it's been something that, I'm in a better place with now, but it's amazing how it affects people, just having to change pretty much every aspect of your life, whether it's working, people who have kids, everyone is experiencing a different scenario, and it's hard to come to terms with. And I think that people need to pay a lot of attention to how they're feeling, like how they're coping with it, and not just brush it off and keep telling people that they're fine, because that's the problem I had for the first couple of weeks. I was like, no, I'm fine, I can still do this at work. And then come the third week, I'd kind of let things get a bit too out of control, I suppose, if you like, and I had to take some time out to reassess and to focus on what was actually happening and to accept it and take it in. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster, but it works. I can still work with clients. Everything seems to be going smoothly enough, and that's all I can hope for, really. So
yeah, it sounds like obviously you and Tarquin have had to adapt somewhat to your usual way of life. And Ian, I'm going to come to you because I know that you're a key worker, so you're not necessarily working from home, but you've got a young family at home. You've got people who are working from home. So from that perspective, what are those challenges that you've seen?
I think it's been a good learning curve for me as well, especially when it comes to mindset with all this, and how I've had to adapt myself to cope throughout this difficult time. And I think where the difficulty lies is that we've gone from we've we all adapt to our mindset at work. You know, we grow a certain presence when we're at work. We have our own behaviours. We wear that work mask, and we're able to deal with different things at work. And we're saying all of a sudden that you're taking all of this mindset that you've grown and learned from work, and now you're mixing it with this way of who you are when you're at home, this sort of friendly, relaxed, chilled out person when you're at home with your slippers on and you're in that safe environment. And all of a sudden we've been chucked in a world where you're asking somebody to quickly adapt to mix in this world of work to this world of being at home, this mindset of behaviours, and all of a sudden they're mixed together. So for 1 minute you are online, you're talking to perhaps a bank manager on a fraud. You know, you've got that headset on, you're thinking about all the different things that they can do to secure their company, and the next minute your toddler runs in and shoots you in the face with a Nerf gun. You know, that's the kind of realism of it, isn't it? It's kind of, I'm adapting myself from work. When I go in the car, I get my headset on to work, I get into the office, I've got my routines, my behaviours kick in, and all of a sudden I am this person at work. When I'm at home, you have that big breath of relief, of fresh air. You're at home, you've got your family, and all of a sudden these worlds have been mixed together. And I think that causes a considerable amount of stress, because it's not just about having these two worlds together, it's about asking that mindset to adapt very quickly from, especially if you're in a house where you've got this young family in just the next room, to adapt from being at work on this, say, conference call like this, to having someone shouting, can you make the lunch, you know, can you change the nappy, all these other sort of things being thrown at you. And it's about that stress levels and managing it. So there's certain things that I've had to do to adapt in order to reduce stress levels and anxieties, in order to perform best at work whilst I'm at home, and also to manage the expectations of the family. Because if you're at home and they know you're at home, they're going to obviously want the best from you to be that family person as well. So there's a few things I've learned. I'm happy to go through some of that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. What's worked, what hasn't worked?
What's worked is and Tarquin hit the nail on the head earlier, and a lot of it is about routine. When we're at home and we're expected to work from home, some bad behaviours can sneak in, such as, if we're working from home, we might end up having a later night, or we tend to perhaps drink more, eat a bit more chocolate. And then maybe in the morning, do I have to get up as early? Well, I could probably leave it to the last 5 minutes before I can be downstairs and log on. And so some of these routines and these behaviours, which perhaps aren't serving us well, begins to creep in, and we can easily become to build some bad habits. So I think that the way that I had to get things organised is to manage my time, and that is to have a specific time where I am at work and expected to be at work up to, say, 8 to 11 o'clock. Communicate well with the family and manage their expectations of me as well, to say between 8 and 11 I'm going to be, and as you can see, I'm in my kitchen, 8 and 11 I'm going to be in here, this is going to be my office for the day. And just so that they understand that that is the time that you're going to be at work. And then obviously when it comes to lunchtime, you can say for that hour, I can then come along and I can make the lunch for everybody, things such as that. And communication between everybody is key. That also means communication with people at work, to say, if they don't know what your household's like, your family position's like. So I explain to the people at my work that obviously I've got a 6-week-old now and a toddler. And it hasn't been just once, but maybe 3 or 4 times that I've been on a call, and off he comes running into the kitchen, screaming and running around. But if I've managed the expectation for people at work, then they know that's a possibility. I just do my best and not let them run into the kitchen whilst that's happening. And one of the bigger things which I think is can easily be forgotten about is space. It doesn't necessarily mean you need a separate room. It means that this seat here is my workspace. This area here on the kitchen table. I sit down and I get myself in that headset. I am back at work. And if I decide to leave this to then enter my family life, I give myself a few moments to adjust from work life, get myself into a mental state to then, when I leave this chair, I am then going into family zone, almost family mindset. Because what happens, what you don't want is to mix the worlds together where you are on your laptop, on the sofa, in a place where you're normally sitting when you're resting. Because you're mixing it too much there. You've got too many behaviours attached to that seat where you relax, and now you're making that the place of work. So I divide them up as best I can. Different room, different chair. This is my work chair. And after that, when I want to leave work, I then take the headset off, close the laptop, and then the next room is family. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to come to Bob now, because you've been advising people and businesses about working from home for years. Are these all kind of usual challenges, or are they specific to like this COVID-19 moment now? How do you see it?
I think they're surprisingly common, actually, Richard. It's interesting hearing the different comments, and even a question down here actually about that whole question as well. I think that, you know, in many different ways, we are impacted when we are remote working compared to being in the office. If you take just some of the statistics around communication, actually, it's phenomenal. Now, if I connect with you in the office on a normal day, I'm probably going to use around 4,000 to 10,000 words of interaction with you, of dialogue. Now, in a remote world, that's very commonly under 1,000 words. And maybe you can imagine a day where somebody has no phone call or no Zoom meeting or something. They have 0 words of dialogue in that day. So, you know, the amount of interaction is massively reduced when we become a remote worker. But, you know, and I think some of that has been heightened by the COVID scenario. That actually now we've got this lockdown and people kind of effectively lone working. You know, can you imagine somebody living on their own in a flat at their kitchen table, as Ian was just saying, you know, working away. They may have no other interaction with somebody else. That is dialogue. That is what my professor friend calls synchronous communication. You know, asynchronous is like email, big chunks of information, time delay, and then a chunk of information back to me. But the synchronous is, you know, instant messaging, phone, video conferencing. That stuff is so useful in getting the connection back into the room and getting the humanity back into a conversation, some of the feedback, some of the empathy, some of the relationship back into work, you know, working as a remote team individual. And I guess for me personally, my life's changed almost unrecognizably since COVID. Although I work in the space of helping people manage remote teams, literally I and my colleagues had quite a full international diary, and you know, in the past 6 weeks I would have even been in Australia running some stuff, and of course now it's all happening from here. So I mean, that's just a massive change, because the interesting thing is people have become accepting of, yeah, we could do it online, whereas this has always been there, and we do it with some clients, but now we're getting organisations saying, yeah, it's okay, maybe we can run a training event or workshop in a remote way, and yeah, let's give it a go, let's give it a try. And it can be, you know, surprisingly good, actually. You can have, you know, some great interaction and people working well. I also just wanted to pick up on something that Tarquin said that I thought was interesting and borne out in the research, actually. If you, you know, there are some myths around remote working. Again, one of the questions down here was asking, well, why do people almost distrust individuals who are remote working? And there's this myth that people won't work as hard. But all the evidence actually says the reverse of that is true. Both Ian and Tarquin picked up on this. So you'll get people answering their phone on the loo, you know, because, oh, it's my boss and I must be available. So they're kind of, you know, they feel this sense of, I've always got to be available. And, you know, whether it's because of the commute being taken away, people are extending the working day, working longer hours. And you've also got this muddling that Ian talked about, is very evident in the research, that you have people who will start doing an email at 9 o'clock in the evening, for example, when ordinarily they probably wouldn't have done. You know, after 1 o'clock, they probably stopped sending emails, but now they're still doing it. And so, you know, I mean, there's picking up on what the guys have been saying, there's some really simple, practical things you can do to help boundary that. You know, even like within a team, just saying, okay, guys, look, it's okay to send an email after 7 p.m. or after, you know, you set the time, but there is no expectation that anyone should answer it until, you know, 8 o'clock the next morning or 9 o'clock the next morning, etc. Because let's face it, if you know, it might be really helpful if you've had to look after the kids at 11 o'clock, it might be really useful at 8 o'clock in the evening for you to just catch up a little bit and do an hour. And that might suit you well and be really appropriate. But actually, if you sent that email to me at 8 o'clock in the evening, and now I feel the pressure to be present because I'm only seen by my deliverables now, you know, I'm not seen by the way I'm working, it's only by my output. That's unhelpful because it's driving me to do something that may be inappropriate or unhelpful for my own well-being and peace of mind. And also my families, you know, as we're saying, you know, kind of my family expectation might be, not me because my kids are all grown up, but, you know, I might be bathing the kids at 6 o'clock or something. But if I've been pulled into a piece of work, then that starts to cause angst and frustration in the home as well. So yeah, it's interesting how COVID is, I think, putting a bit of a microscope onto the world of remote working. But, you know, I go back to many of the issues have always been there, and there's some good practice about, okay, if I am a remote worker, how do I overcome that?
So Tarquin, but from listening to what all the other panelists have said, going back to your original point about cyber criminals, and their whole aim is to make you not think about things, right?
They want to they want to exploit the fact that you've got loads of things on your mind, not necessarily urgent, but, you know, the anxieties people at the moment. And it's not just, I mean, I think, funny enough, the Prime Minister put it quite well in his speech yesterday, or talked to on television yesterday. It's not just about the current disease that's causing people to be anxious. It's about the future. And when we're anxious, our mind tends to, you know, focus on what we're anxious about and not really focus on what we're doing at the moment. And criminals look to exploit that opportunity, to exploit that disconnect by also exerting extra pressure on people. So, you know, in a lot of these scam emails or text messages, there will always be a sense of urgency to force people to make decisions quickly without actually thinking or taking the time to think. But I also think there's a really important point by all the speakers about the individual. You know, if I think somebody's written down about what's it like being in a bedsit on your own, having to deal with this, and you're not able to communicate with anybody or to share thoughts or to figure out what's going on, that the pressure must be extraordinary in those circumstances. So that ability to communicate, especially organizations to communicate with people who are in their workforce, is really critical. In Reliance, for example, our team leaders all talk to their teams on a daily basis. And we get the whole company together once a week to just go over issues. And I'll be frank about it, initially, there was a real reluctance, or should I say, reservation about people talking. But as we've gone on through this crisis and we've developed more trust and confidence, people are coming up with more questions about what's going on and sharing their concerns. And I think, you know, if you're sharing your concerns with other people, it's much more easy to put them in perspective and to protect yourself and to make yourself much more resilient. So I think that communications piece, that ability, especially to talk to the people who are on their own, is absolutely critical, not just to their, well, specifically to their mental well-being, but also to protecting them themselves online and to making them more resilient.
So we're going to pop to some questions in a moment. I know that we've answered quite a few there. I don't know whether there are any new ones, but just before we do, I'd just like to ask Krystal's opinion on how video conferencing, how close that is to that real kind of live communication, because your job is all around that one-to-one personal interaction. Is it a massive difference? Is it a good enough replication?
It's good that I can still do something with clients. It's not as ideal as being in a gym with all the right equipment, face to face, being able to properly see the client. I mean, depending on the space that they have available, where their camera is there glare coming from the window, I'm sometimes struggling to see them properly and to see if they're in the right position. but I've got to communicate. I've got to be able to say, oh, can you just move slightly this way, or can you move your phone down a little bit? I can't quite see you there. So there's a lot more communication goes on just in that sense, because in the gym, I move around the client to make sure that they're moving in the way that I want them to be. So there's a lot more communication to make sure that they're doing what I need them to do, and to make sure that, you know, ultimately they don't hurt themselves in the process. Because in the gym, I'm a few feet away from them, making sure that I can move around and make sure that they're in the right position with whatever weight I've given them. So it's a lot more communication in that sense, just so that I can see them clearly enough for them to perform the exercise properly. But I've been working with most of them now for quite some time. I think my least serving client that I've been doing online sessions with is maybe 6 months in. So, you know, we've had that 6 months in the gym. I know what she's capable of. I know how she moves. I know that she can perform all these exercises in a safe way. So I'm never going to give her something new to try doing the online sessions, because it hasn't been tested out in the gym before. So I can only use exercises that I've done with her face to face, because I know that she can perform them safely in her home environment. So it's different, and it has taken some getting used to, but it does work. But it involves communication, a bit more communication, just to make sure that they can safely do these workouts in their home environment. But yeah, very, very different. But we can still, you know, we can still talk during rest sessions. We still have a laugh. We catch up on the week and, you know, what's been going on. And, you know, but again, like Ian was saying, with these kids coming in, there's been clients' kids running in and knocking the phone over and trying to grab a weight or something like that. So, you know, it's taken, it's a bit of fun at the same time, but it's taken that solely one-to-one element away if they've got, you know, kids in the background trying to get in about. But, you know, you work with it because it's all you can do. Everyone's situation has changed massively, and you've just got to make the most of it given the circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that's the key line there, isn't it? Everyone has to kind of make the most of it in the circumstances that they're in. Charlie, I'm going to come to you. Have we got any questions at the moment?
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, we've had some really good questions. The most popular is this: why is there so much suspicion for home workers? Is it just the mindset that because people can't see you working, you obviously aren't? Or is it a question of jealousy?
Well, literally everyone is nodding their head there. So as it's about mindset, I'm going to go to Ian first. What's your opinion on that, Ian?
Well, it's difficult to want to answer because it's quite broad. So we're talking about potentially some specific supervisors or managers out there who are doing this or imparting this onto the colleagues. And I would say if this is happening, it potentially is because they are used to being in a place where they can oversee your work. They can probably pop in the office and see you working, and that has been taken away from them. And now all they can do is imagining is, are you getting the work done? It's to do with actually their mindset as to, are the people that I'm asking to work, are they working from home or are they being lazy? And it's what they are creating in their mind, because they no longer have that control of checking up on you face to face when they want to. I suggest I'm assuming that is possibly what's going on, but because individuals are going to be different, different managers are going to have different styles. That's kind of a broad answer to potentially a broad question. Unless anyone else wants to pop in for that as well. Any thoughts?
Can I jump in, Richard?
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Yeah. Well, this, as I mentioned earlier, is quite I suppose, a fear within organisations when they allow people to become remote workers. It was definitely a fear that was being articulated to me when we first went into COVID. I actually had one organisation, an international bank, who contacted us, and they were asking exactly this: how can we make sure people will work hard enough when they're at home? And interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, the research suggests that the reverse is true. That the fact is, as I suggested, people cannot see you work anymore, as Ian was just saying. So in the office, I oversee the way you work. I just witness whether you're using the right process. I understand the appropriateness of your actions, whether you've done something in a good way or a bad way. The moment I become a remote manager of you, all I get is output, output, output. I don't see any of the nuances of how that's gone. And so there's a lot of fears associated with that. But the reality is, I think that a lot of it is unfounded fear, and it doesn't take long before people start to settle on that. Once you get into remote working, you start to see people are actually behaving in an appropriate way. And of course, somebody may, you know, pull the wool and be taking it easy. That's always a possibility, isn't it? But I think that the greatest majority of people will step up what they're doing to try and make themselves visible. In fact, there's evidence that suggests prior to COVID, okay, in the remote working world, if you were a remote team member and there was a hub within an office, for example, there's a suggestion that actually the remote team workers weren't getting promoted so much because they're not so visible as the people in the office. And so there's a sort of a risk issue of being a remote team worker that probably everyone is fighting against, in that they want to make themselves visible and almost treat themselves like a marketing brand. You know, any marketeer has to put the brand constantly in front of the audience. And in a sense, as a remote team worker, you know, we may have that in the back of our minds, or it may be useful to have that in the back of our minds. You know, how do I have presence when I'm not there, so that actually people are aware of what I'm doing and how I'm doing stuff? And you know, I think it's always you know, on any training course, you can answer almost any question with the word communication, and you're probably going to be right. You know, it's one of those magic words. And of course, you have to ask, what do I mean by that communication? But at the heart of this is an increase in your ability to, you know, to make yourself available, to make yourself visible, to give those snail trails, I call them. I suppose a breadcrumb trail might be a better idea of where you've been, what you've been doing. And so, you know, historically, for example, in remote working teams, just using your calendar to say where you are, what meeting you're in, can be super useful. Because if your boss is trying to get you and you know, there's nothing in your calendar and you're not answering, they're going, well, why isn't Bob there? Why can't I connect with Bob? What is he just, you know, kind of down the bottom of the garden having a beer or something? But actually, if you can see if Bob's put a 2-hour or an hour session webinar in his diary right now, when you try and get me, then there's already an awareness of what I'm doing and my activity at that point in time. So I think, you know, it's really important to communicate what we're up to when we're a remote worker. But the reverse of that is really true as well. It's really important to have breaks, because, you know, the downside of this is I work, and we say extend the day. And, you know, I sat down at my kitchen table at 8:30 and I'm still there at 1 o'clock without having got up. That's not necessarily good, is it?
I was going to say, Bob, that that the reverse is also true, as you just mentioned, that I feel some people, depending on what person they are, personality type they are, they will go above and beyond to prove to the managers that they are working hard from home. And I hear people working beyond the hours that they were supposed to finish, to actually show to the managers that, yeah, I'm still here at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So people actually are working above and beyond to prove to the managers that they are doing their role.
Yeah. I mean, a good manager, I mean, we need to stress this with managers, especially in a remote environment. You know, trust is such an enormous thing in remote working. And it is actually one of the biggest things that can be damaged. Given an hour, I could prove this to you, but there are 3 major ingredients in trust, and they are all massively impacted by remote working. So very quickly, they are intimacy, my level of closeness. I trust somebody who's very close to me rather than separate from me. The second is credibility. I trust people who have competence, capability, who don't let me down, who are referenced and credentialed, etc. And I only have to trust if there is an element of risk. You know, I could go down onto the street here with an empty wallet. I could hand it to somebody. I don't have to trust them much. But actually, if that wallet is stuffed full of ID, credit cards, money, I am now putting something at risk when I hand it over, and that would be requiring an act of trust to do that. So if we think about those three things, we talk about a formula: intimacy times credibility divided by risk, because the higher the risk, the more I need intimacy and credibility to be willing to trust you. But all of those three things, my level of closeness, intimacy with somebody, is damaged when I become a remote worker. My potential of credibility is damaged as well. I don't see you working. I don't understand how you're working anymore. We also lose social learning, which is where I learn off you just sitting next to you in the office. You know, I stop fine-tuning and improving what I'm doing. So credibility can be damaged, and also risk goes up for all sorts of reasons. Personal risk, I'm now a lone worker. If I fall over and bang my head in the kitchen, who's going to pick me up? But then organizational risk. Do I become a bit maverick because actually I'm not just touching base with somebody before I make a decision? I'm just thinking I'll make that decision myself because it's harder to contact somebody. So you can really see very easily how trust can be impacted by remote working. And it so needs to be injected back in so that managers have trust in their workforce and don't start questioning whether they're doing stuff. And you do that real simply by relationship intimacy, by helping people maintain credibility and minimizing risk across those three ideas.
I think, like you said, we could quite easily talk about probably each of those things for an hour. Unfortunately, we only have an hour for everything today. So I'd like to move on a little bit, and I'm going to share a picture with everyone now, which will hopefully bring us on to the next one. I have this person's permission, who's on the panel, as to a situation that they found themselves in. So this is that situation. Now, there's a couple of questions I have. Firstly, how big was that bird? But secondly, I'm sure a lot of people out there are probably feeling like life is doing something similar to them at the moment. How do you keep that positive mindset and smile through something like that and keep going?
Right. So this almost could be said as karma. I popped to the pub. I was visiting my mum, and my brother and I wanted to go for a little walk. We popped in a pub where really we should have been at home. And as I come out the pub, it felt like there was a plasterer above us at the top of this pub who dropped a bucket on me, and it was heavy, it was thick, and it was a lot. It was all over my back and everything like that. And I looked up, expecting, once I realised it was bird poo, to see a 5 or 6 pigeons above me, but it was just one very heavy set pigeon looking down at me, and I immediately become extremely angry. I was very angry at this pigeon, this one big heavy pigeon, and I wanted to do anything to climb up. It was out of reach. I couldn't get it, and I was furious. And then after I allowed myself to breathe and calm down and let my logical brain begin to sort of get a grip of my emotional brain, it's to do with finding it's to do with changing your perspective even in the most difficult times. And once I looked down through the pub window, there was people laughing hilariously at me, and passersby in the cars which were stopping in traffic all looking at me and having a good laugh. And I thought, I could either lose it or I could actually join in with them. And in the end, I just laughed through it because there's nothing I could do about it. It was out of my control. A lot of anxiety is about control. Is it in my control? Is it out of my control? It was completely out of my control. The pigeon had done what it needed to do, and it needed to do it, unfortunately, on my head and face. Luckily, I was wearing sunglasses. The positive, there's always a different perspective. On the positive, I was wearing my sunglasses. If I wasn't, it would have tarmacked my eyeballs. So I was very grateful I was wearing my sunglasses. It stank. You have no idea how much it stank. It was horrific, and I walked all the way home with my poopy body of shame. I walk with shame with poop on, but just without the, well, pun intended, shit happens, and a lot of the time it's how you can make good of a shit situation, and that's the only swear words I'll do, I promise. It's about it's obviously about perception. It gave a lot of people a laugh, and I learned a lot from it as well, of how to manage my emotions at a time of impact and crisis for me at the time. And I think this awful pandemic has taught everyone a lot about how we can bond together how we can communicate easier. People are getting closer, but being further apart. People are communicating with people they haven't spoken to for a long time via the internet. And I think people are actually talking more than they would before, because they'd always expect that they would meet up with that person in a year's time down the pub or down the park, but it never happens. But now people are making this amazing effort, and I think it's in this time of disaster, there is always hope, and people the communities are getting together. They are fundraising for different things in order to make things stronger, and it's great to see what people are learning about themselves, and also the time that they're using, how they're utilising it. So that picture for me I'll just say one word: perception. There's always another perception for difficult times, and sometimes it's difficult to have that other perception, but there's always another frame, another way to look at that that incident of crap. So,
like, without trying to laugh too hard. Sorry, Ian.
That's okay. I hope I summed it up okay. I thought I'd just go off on one from there. Yeah.
Perfect. Don't worry. Perfect. Krystal, I'm going to come to you, because I know you alluded to it at the start, but I know that you have personal experience about potentially being in that place mentally and not seeing the way out. Have you kind of got any advice to maybe people who are watching who feel that way now?
Just to, first of all, accept it within yourself, and speak to somebody about it, because the problems I got myself into several years ago was because I was keeping everything to myself and I wasn't sharing how I was feeling, and because I wasn't really aware of what was going on. There was anxiety, there was depression, and it was all new to me, and all these new feelings just made me feel awful. But because I was keeping it all to myself and I was just sweeping it all under the carpet, it just all built up until, you know, it got to the point where it all just blew up in my face. And I think you need to recognize the difference in yourself and be able to, or feel comfortable enough talking to somebody, whether it's a family member, best friend, a free service Samaritans. You know, there's quite a few places you can call up just to talk to somebody about how you're feeling. I think that accepting it first and then talking to somebody about it is absolutely vital, because if you let it get worse and worse and worse, it's going to end up being, you know, you're going to be in a worse off position further down the line if you leave it too long. So I think just, yeah, definitely talking to somebody will help, and then taking the necessary steps to help you get better and to deal with it, because it's, I mean, this, you know, COVID-19 has put people in situations that they've never been in before and probably won't ever be in again. So no one knows how to deal with it, and it's totally new. And if you are somebody who's quite anxious, then it can be a real shock to the system. And I think that's where I fell down in like week 3 of lockdown. I hadn't really accepted everything, and I was too busy focusing on how I could work from home, how's this going to work, how's that going to work, and all these new feelings and emotions were building up inside of me that I was ignoring because I was too busy focusing on this. Yeah, and it can hit you out of nowhere, and I think as long as you're aware of how you're feeling and how different it is to how you usually feel, and if you're prepared to talk about it, and it helps you keep control of it a little bit more, and just having people around you to talk to. And I know, again, it's something that we all experience in different ways, because I'm lucky, I've got a big family, I've got a good group of friends that I can talk to about absolutely anything. And I know some people aren't in that position. Some people's home lives are going to be different. Maybe you don't have a close-knit family, maybe you don't have that friendship group. And if you're totally alone, then gosh, I can only imagine how difficult that could be if you were experiencing any mental health issues, if you didn't have someone to talk to, family or friends wise. That's why it's so important to get the message out there that there are helplines available. You know, if you feel you don't have someone in person or someone that you can pick up the phone to, there are helplines out there that you can talk to somebody and just not feel so alone. So the key is definitely speaking about it as soon as possible. As soon as you've come to terms with the fact that there's an issue there, you need to voice it to somebody.
And have you got any kind of advice for maybe people who have a family member or friend that they feel is feeling like this, how do they approach them to help them?
Yeah, just to keep asking, keep talking, keep checking in with them, because I know certainly in my case, when I was feeling at my worst, I was putting the face on and pretending like there wasn't a problem. And because I wasn't speaking about it or showing it to anybody, no one was asking me about it because no one knew it was there. But I think if you feel like there's a friend who's maybe a little bit quiet or not quite being themselves, then you just need to keep checking in on these people, all these people that are important to you, family, friends. You need to stay in touch, daily, even if it's just a text message, or you pick up the phone, or you invite them to, a Zoom quiz or a bingo night or something that people are doing, and just, keep an eye on them as much as you can, because a lot of people won't want to talk initially, but if you just keep showing that you're there for them daily, then if they do feel like talking, they might come to you if you show them that you're a shoulder for them, or you're an ear for them. And it's even harder now because we can't go and visit people. We can't just show up in someone's door and have a cup of coffee and a chat. So it's probably even harder now to keep in touch with those people. It all has to be done through either through this, like FaceTime chat, Zoom chats, text messages, phone calls, and it probably needs to be even more constant than it would be if we were actually allowed to go and visit. So yeah, we just need to keep communicating, keep talking to those important people in your life, just to make sure that everyone is okay. And even if they're not, the fact that you keep asking might mean that you're the person they come to when they finally do feel like opening up.
So it seems to be back to what you were talking about, Bob, is that whole communication and how important that is, both for working effectively and managing your, not just working from home, but your mental health as well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things Krystal mentioned that it prompted in my mind, there's a little tool called the PANAS model. I think it stands for Positive and Negative Attributes Survey. The S might not be survey, I can't remember. But if you Google PANAS, P-A-N-A-S, it's a little list of positive and negative attributes, and it's like a little self-assessment just to give yourself a bit of, okay, where am I with this? And actually for managers who are managing remote teams, again, they lose that insight. If I'm in the office with you, I can just go, Krystal, you all right today? You pick up on those vibes, but it's much more difficult to do that in a remote working environment. So, a little PANAS model can be quite useful to just help you think through, am I okay? But actually, are my team members okay?
There's a couple of apps as well that have been really useful to me in the past and to other people that I know. Calm is one of them, and Headspace is another. They've got some really useful tools in there just for helping people manage stress a bit better, how to help them sleep a bit better. There's meditations in there, and I find that it's really helpful for people. Again, it doesn't involve them talking. If they're not that comfortable talking to somebody, you can log on to these apps and it will give you things to practice to try and help you with your headspace and get your mind in the right place. So they're a couple of useful apps, Calm and Headspace, if anyone finds them useful.
So yeah, we've just put the link to those in the chat section. So if you wanted to copy and paste the link to those,
the PANAS thing actually is positive and negative affect schedule. And if you type PANAS wellbeing in Google, it comes up straight away at the top with a Wikipedia entrance.
So I'm very aware that we've got about 5-6 minutes left. So I'd love to take some questions from our viewers, as many as we can get in within the next few minutes. It would be great. Charlie, have we got any?
Yeah, thank you very much for the story, Ian. We've had some compelling questions about birds, which I'll let you peruse at your leisure. But since we're getting towards the end of the webinar, it's a really interesting question at the top here. What is your advice on tackling anxiety around returning to work when things get back to what we might call normal?
Yeah, so I'll answer this as quickly as possible. We'll know how long we've got left. So your anxiety is obviously created in your imagination. You're imagining a worst case scenario as when you're going back to work. You need to work out whether the picture that you're creating is what you're creating, something in your control or out of your control. If it's in your control, work out what you can do to change this worst case scenario, or speak to a supervisor before you go back to work to let them know what your fears or your anxiety is about. So that is a good way to lower it. Speaking to somebody at work before you go back and letting them know how you feel as well, so that they can let you get into a place where, you know, where you can just keep yourself calm to go back to work. If it's not in your control, you need to look into how you're creating your anxiety to remove it. If it's not in your control, they have to say, do you need to worry about it? Is it in your control? Yes, do something about it. Don't worry. Is it not in your control? Then don't worry about it. That's all very well and said, but you need to work out how you're doing your anxiety, which is, are you picturing it? Are you speaking to yourself in a certain way? And once you begin to do this, take some time to learn to understand how you're doing it and change it. Change the picture in your mind into a good outcome, into you going back into work, being successful, etc. Or change the way you're speaking to yourself. When you're doing it, you're going to probably be breathing in a short, sharp way. Slow your breathing down. Get up and move from where you're sitting, because you're more likely sitting in a slumped state. Get your body up and moving, and look to practice changing your mindset about what you're anxious about, and that will begin to calm those the neurons in your head, and it will hopefully begin to dim down the more you practice things such as that. Hopefully I got all that in a nutshell.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good for that time. Charlie, any more?
Yeah, I'll try and mix two, as I'm conscious of time. But we've spoken a lot about how it can be quite challenging working from home. Do you guys feel that it might be better working from home? It might, in fact, be an improver on your productivity. And is there anything anyone can do as we come out of the current situation to help their companies take up some of these positives and work them back into how they do their everyday in the future?
So I think actually I'm going to pitch that to each and every one of you with kind of like almost like a final thought. So if we go around in the same kind of order as we did to begin with, Tarquin, I'll come to you first on that one.
Well, there's a lot of talk about working from home and whether it is the new normal, depending on what the new normal is going to be. We don't know. I do think it's going to change some perceptions. I think part of the reason why people worry about working from home, if you're a manager, is about trust, and it's about looking at things from an input side rather than an output side, which is very much what Bob was talking about. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a greater productivity from people working at home. We've got to, as businesses, we've got to look at what actually works for all of us. In a company like Reliance, we've got a lot of our people who've always or had an opportunity to work from home and have worked effectively from home. But that may change from one organization to another. It very much depends on what the business is doing. But I can't see why working from home should not be seen as a good thing if it actually improves productivity.
And Ian, anything to add there?
I'd just say that it's a lot of it depends on the business and the type of person. Different businesses, it won't work well, and different people, depending on what sort of person they are, will work better in an office with other people in a team, and some people will work better at home on their own. So I do think it's individual basis and business by business basis. So it's quite a different one to. It depends. I think a lot of companies will learn a lot. And a lot of people will be able to take advantage of this new way of working. So I think it can only do good in the future. Yeah.
Krystal?
I mean, certainly having, even before COVID, half of my business was online anyway. So I've been used to working from home in that sense. But the one-to-one personal training that I do is better in a gym environment. So I am missing that. But it's nice to know that I can still do something. I can still train clients from home, if needed. Obviously not ideal, but it's been a learning curve, and it's just like you said, it's individual to each person. And I don't have staff. It's just me in my own little business. So not having the interaction at the gym, even just seeing people face to face, I've really missed that. And I live alone, so I don't have that, I don't have the family, I don't have people around me. So I miss just going to the gym and having a chat to other PTs and other members there. But it's good to know that I can still work, at least, even if I don't have the contact that I'm used to. I can still work, and it works quite well.
And finally, Bob.
Yeah, I kind of hope that it does alter the way we work a little bit. You know, I think there's going to be an interesting sort of A/B shifting type thing as people go back to big offices, you know, sort of A group in the morning, B group in the afternoon, or A today and B tomorrow, whatever it might be. I would like to think that some of those could be introduced on a longer term for people who it works with. I would concur what Ian said about it depends on the individual. For some people, their motivation levels might be significantly impacted by being a remote team worker. And we've done a bit of analysis and assessment on that as well. And if you're okay with me doing it, I can just bung in a URL of a blog post with an assessment tool in it to help people understand whether the motivation is impacted by remote working. Yeah, I think, you know, that every cloud has a silver lining, doesn't it? And I think there's the potential for some real good to come out of this and the opportunity to be more flexible in the future. And organizations have had to, many organizations have had to work it through and understand that they can use remote working in a really effective way. Much of the population, of course, have closed down, they're furloughed. So those types of organization are probably those where it's impossible to, you know, they've got to be present, shops, pubs, you know, all those types of things where the people have got to be present to do the job. But yeah, hopefully we start to see a bit more openness in the future about working and how we work.
Okay, that's absolutely fantastic from everyone. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We didn't even get to the whole kind of physical exercise part. So apologies, we didn't get that far. Yeah, exactly.
If anybody has any questions regarding physical activity or nutrition during this time, if anybody has any questions they'd like to message me about, they can do that through contacting me on my, I think you put my details up on the chat here, but I'm on Facebook as Krystal Fitness and I'm on Instagram as Krystal Fitness UK. So if anyone does have any questions regarding fitness or nutrition, then feel free to get in touch.
Great, that's fantastic. And what we're actually going to do, if you guys can do it in the background there, is put everyone's contact website address in there again, like the Facebook one, like Ian's or Bob's and Reliance's website in there. So have a look in the chat function and hopefully that will be coming up soon. In fact, it's there now. We are going to close this down soon, so everything in the chat and the Q&A section is going to disappear. So if you want to take anything away, try and copy and paste that out now. You've probably got about 30 seconds or so left while we wrap up. But an absolutely fantastic session. Like I said, we've run out of time. We've gone over already and we haven't even come anywhere near to finishing each individual section or even starting an extra one. So it's really good. So I just want to say, obviously, thank you to all of the panel for joining us. It is part of a whole national series. There are more every Monday and Thursday that we're going to do. So if you're interested in logging on to any of those future ones, I'm just going to talk you through how you can do that now. So all you have to do is go onto your Eventbrite page and type in a search for National Police Team. That is then going to bring up a whole load of random ones in a strange time order for some reason. Just click onto any one of those. We'll give you details of that event, but if you scroll down, you can select National Policing Protect Network, and that will give you a list of all the upcoming events in chronological order. So you can see this is the one we've done today. Our next one is on Thursday, and it's going to be about security in the cloud. So you can just go in there again, register, so the more the merrier. We hopefully you've registered there, and we'll see you at that one. So again, just a massive thank you to all my panel for taking the time today. It's been really interesting and quite amusing at times as well, which is good. But especially thank you to everyone for signing in and watching. You are going to get sent through to a request for a feedback form. It would be great if you could just spend 30 seconds filling that out. There's only a few questions, there's not many, but we're trying to make this the best we can. So tell us what we do well, tell us what we're doing not so well, and what we can improve on the next time. But apart from that, I hope you all have a great day, a great rest of the week, and hopefully see you at the next one. Bye.